the most popular weight loss medication on the market just recently killed my mom, allegedly.
The short answer is this is highly unlikely. Now, I'm not discounting what this woman or her mother went through, whether or not she had cancer, but I think it's very important before we start alleging that certain things cause cancer that we look at the data and allow the data to help us understand how these things work. Where does this pancreatic cancer concern come from? Well, some early observational studies on GLP-1s, mind you, they have been FDA approved since 2005, suggested a slightly increased risk of developing pancreatic cancer. In 2016, the FDA came out with this warning. So it's important to note the FDA doesn't just slam the door on this. They add box warnings. They want to collect more data so that they can understand and better refine the answer to this question as to whether GLP-1s cause cancer. And when we've looked at hundreds of thousands and millions of patients exposed to this drug, when we have meta-analyzed over a dozen randomized controlled trials, we found no association between GLP-1 agonists and pancreatic cancer. A new study in July that did all sorts of fancy analytic techniques looking at exposure to GLP-1s, monitoring these patients over long periods of time, suggested there was no increase in risk. In fact, when we compare it to insulin, it actually lowers the risk of developing at least 10 different types of cancers, one of which happens to be pancreatic cancer. The reason the FDA doesn't just throw out medications at the first signal of potential concern is that there are a lot of biases in the world, particularly individual anecdotal cases. And that is because we just can't account for all the different interacting parts. And where there might be coincidences, we might overinterpret that and assume that there is a causal relationship between two things that are happening around the same time as one another. That doesn't mean that the development of cancer isn't any less tragic, any less unfortunate. It just means we have to be careful. And it's why we have to be very objective and analytical and look at the data, because ultimately we really need to know and at least get as close as we possibly can to the truth.